Randy Owen has always stood before tens of thousands of fans with his familiar guitar and the voice that led Alabama. Songs like Song of the South and Love in the First Degree gradually became part of the collective memory of American country music. Yet behind the bright stage lights were things the audience never saw. There were nights when he kept singing, even as pounding headaches made everything around him feel like it was spinning, and years when he had to quietly swallow his tears as he said goodbye first to his father and then to his mother. And more painful than all of that was the moment he had to face cancer, a diagnosis that forced him to look back at his entire life in a completely different way. So what has the real life of Randy Owen truly been like? Stay with us until the end of this video as we look back on that journey together, and if this story touches your heart, please leave a comment as a tribute to the artist who sang for an entire generation. Some children are born among the fields, yet fate prepares a very different road for them. Randy Owen was born on the 13th of December, 1949, in the small town of Fort Payne, Alabama, where red dirt roads wind through cotton fields, stretching all the way to the horizon. It was a quiet rural world of harvest seasons, where life was measured by long days of labor under the southern sun, and where children grew up almost already knowing the path laid out before them, circling around farms, church gatherings, and the pieces of land their families had passed down through generations. Randy's childhood began in much the same way. His mornings often started before the sun had even appeared, when the work on the farm was already waiting. Long days followed one another amid the smell of soil, the scent of grass, and the unmistakable heat of Alabama. In those days, very few people imagined that a boy from this small town might one day step beyond the familiar boundaries of those fields and enter a much larger world. Yet amid the repetitive rhythm of labor and harvest seasons, music slowly found its way into Randy's life as something different. Melodies drifting from the old radio in the house, country songs played during family gatherings, all quietly planted a feeling in the young boy that even he could not yet name. Music was not just something to hear and forget. It felt like a small doorway opening into a world far wider than the cotton fields surrounding Fort Payne. Randy began playing guitar at a very young age. His first chords may have been clumsy, his fingers sometimes missing the rhythm, but every time the strings rang out, he felt as though he was truly alive. Many years later, Randy once said, "It wasn't that I chose music, it was music that chose me." By the late 1960s, Randy began playing music with his cousin Teddy Gentry. The two young men learned guitar together, playing familiar country songs, and performing at local parties or small school events. There were no large audiences, no recording contracts, only the simple joy of making music together. But it was in those humble performances that they began to realize something important. Music could become an entire life. Not long afterward, they invited another cousin to join them, Jeff Cook. Jeff was a versatile musician who could switch from lead guitar to fiddle and then sit down at the keyboard, all within the same performance. When Jeff joined, the small band finally had its three essential pieces. From the days when they still called themselves Young Country and later changed the name to Wild Country, Randy Owen gradually became the central voice of the band. Singing lead while keeping the rhythm on guitar, he brought a voice that carried the unmistakable character of the American South, warm, sincere, as if every song were telling a real story from life itself. By the early 1970s, music was no longer just something they played for fun. While studying English at Jacksonville State University, Randy slowly realized that the path he truly wanted to follow was not inside a classroom, but on the stage. After Randy and Jeff finished their studies, the three of them made a decision that was, in many ways, a bold gamble. They moved in together in Anniston, Alabama, setting aside every stable option in order to pursue the band full-time, even though the future ahead of them was still completely uncertain. The early years of Wild Country were far from easy. They played anywhere that had a stage. From small bars to amusement parks, sometimes even at local fairs with only a few dozen people watching. There were nights when they stood on stage for hours just to earn enough money for gasoline and rent. Yet those difficult years became the band's true school, where they learned how to keep their passion alive before any audience, sharpened their stage presence, and gradually began writing songs of their own. And then the great turning point finally arrived in 1980. The major turning point came when the band secured a contract with RCA Records, thanks to the deeply home-spirited song My Home's in Alabama. The track was co-written by Randy Owen and Teddy Gentry, and it was far more than just another country song. It felt like a declaration of their roots, a tribute to the land that had raised them from the very beginning. After signing the contract, the band decided to change their name to Alabama. The name was not a marketing strategy, but rather a way of bringing their hometown directly onto the stage, ensuring that every song would carry a reminder of where everything had begun. From that moment on, Randy Owen gradually became the central face of the band. As the frontman, he stood in the leading position on stage with a warm, resonant voice and a sincere performing style that made audiences feel as though they were listening to a story told straight from the American South itself. Not long after the name Alabama began appearing in the country music scene, their songs quickly climbed onto the charts. Mountain Music, Dixieland Delight, and Love in the First Degree soon echoed across radio stations throughout the United States. The appeal of those songs was not only in their memorable melodies, but also in the sense of familiarity they carried. In every lyric were images of southern roads, small towns, and the simple rhythms of life that so many people had experienced. By the early 1980s, Alabama was no longer seen merely as a local band. Their name spread rapidly, becoming one of the most prominent acts in country music at the time. Radio stations constantly played their songs, and their concerts attracted larger and larger audiences. From the small stages of earlier days, the band was now appearing in major theaters and even packed stadiums filled with fans. Alabama's success did not come from just a few isolated hits, but from a long chain of songs that continuously captured the public's heart. Throughout the 1980s and well into the 1990s, their names seemed to remain almost constantly on the charts. In total, the band sold around 75 million albums, a figure that placed Alabama among the most successful country artists in history. In addition, they achieved 42 #1 hits, a milestone that very few artists of their era managed to reach. Yet what made Alabama truly special was not only the impressive numbers, their music carried a distinct feeling, something deeply familiar and authentic. Songs such as Song of the South, Mountain Music, and Dixieland Delight gradually became melodies woven into everyday life for many listeners. They played on the radio during long road trips, at family gatherings, or on warm summer evenings when people sat together on their front porches. On stage, Randy Owen always stood at the center with his familiar rhythm guitar. His performance style was not flashy, but it was full of energy and sincerity. That natural authenticity allowed audiences to easily lose themselves in the music. Many Alabama concerts became unforgettable moments when tens of thousands of fans sang along to every line, transforming the stage into a shared space where music and memory blended together among everyone present. Yet, the brighter the spotlight became, the deeper the shadows behind it grew. The peak years of Alabama also meant an exhausting touring schedule that left almost no empty space in their lives. The band traveled constantly from one city to another, sometimes performing hundreds of shows in a single year. The tour bus became Randy Owen's second home, while unfamiliar hotel rooms scattered across America slowly replaced the true sense of home. Life on the road offered no stability, only long journeys, back-to-back performances, and a rhythm of living that repeated endlessly. Over time, Randy began to realize the true cost of success. In his memoir, Born Country, he admitted that his music career had caused him to miss many important moments in his children's lives. There were Christmas holidays when he was not home, birthdays he could only hear about through a phone call, and countless childhood memories that passed without him being there. Those seemingly small moments were, in truth, the ones that could never be brought back. Looking back on that period, Randy Owen once said a line that left many people thinking for a long time. "Every night I sang about family in front of thousands of people, yet far too many times I could not be with my own family." Fame gave Randy Owen almost everything an artist could dream of: wealth, awards, and the admiration of millions of fans. But there was one thing that none of that success could ever replace: time. Every additional week on tour meant another stretch of time away from his family. And while audiences saw a country music star living in the glow of fame, Randy himself began to feel the emptiness that fame could never truly fill. And along with those pressures, there was another quiet presence that followed him year after year: his health. After decades of standing on stage, Randy Owen began to realize that the human body does not always keep pace with the rhythm of music. The tours that had once been the breath of his life, the nights of performing from one city to another, the stage lights so bright that the whole world seemed to shrink to just a few square meters in front of the microphone, all gradually became challenges his body could no longer overcome as easily as before. At first, the signs were subtle: a passing headache after a show, a brief moment of dizziness when stepping off the stage, a few minutes of fatigue once the lights went down. For someone who had long lived within the relentless pace of the music world, these things hardly seemed worth worrying about. He always believed they were simply the small price to pay for a life bound to the stage, something every performer had to accept. But then the headaches began appearing more frequently. They were no longer brief aches, but intense migraines that made the lights feel blinding, made sounds seem overwhelmingly loud, and slowed everything around him to a strange haze. There were afternoons before a show when Randy had to sit alone in the backstage room, closing his eyes for long stretches just to let the dizziness fade. Even so, he still stepped onto the stage because he never wanted to disappoint the audience. But over time, the signs of exhaustion became clearer. Long tours began to wear him down more quickly. Consecutive nights of performances left his body with too little time to recover. Though he still carried the spirit of a professional artist, Randy understood that the pace of life he had followed for decades was slowly becoming too heavy for him. Then, in 2010, his life suddenly turned in a completely different direction. That was when the doctors delivered a diagnosis that suddenly made everything feel fragile: prostate cancer. The news did not come with noise or public spectacle. There was no press conference, no dramatic headlines in the newspapers. Randy had never been the kind of person to turn his private pain into a public story. Instead, he chose to face his illness in the quietest way possible, almost so privately that many fans only learned about it after everything had already passed. After researching different treatment options, he decided to travel to Mexico to undergo HIFU therapy, a high-intensity focused ultrasound treatment that was still relatively new at the time. For Randy, the most important thing was not how others perceived his decision, but finding a path that would allow him to continue living and moving forward. The period of treatment was far from easy. The days spent lying in a hospital room offered him a rare moment of stillness after decades of living under stage lights. The man who had grown used to standing in front of thousands of people, accustomed to applause and constant touring, now had to learn how to face his own body in silence. The illness forced him to look back at his life in a completely different way. Fame, money, and awards suddenly felt small when confronted with the fragility of health. There are things that no chart ranking can give, and there are also things that stage lights can never preserve. When the treatment was completed and the disease was brought under control, Randy did not return to his old rhythm of life the way he once had. It was not because he had lost his love for music, but because he had begun to understand more clearly the value of simpler things. Tours lasting for months had once been normal. Nights of performances following one after another had once been the rhythm of his life. But after going through that illness, Randy realized that time spent with family, with his health, and with himself was what truly mattered. The music was still there, but it was no longer a race. Then, nearly a decade later, when everything seemed to have settled down, his body began sending different signals once again. In 2019, during Alabama's 50th anniversary tour, Randy Owen began to clearly feel that time was quietly changing his body. The dizziness returned, more persistent than before. The migraines lingered, sometimes making the stage lights painfully bright, while sounds that once energized him occasionally left him feeling disoriented. There were nights when, standing amid the lights and music, Randy suddenly felt the entire stage sway for a few brief seconds. For the audience, it was only a fleeting moment. But for the man standing at the microphone, it was a very real reminder that his body was no longer as strong as it had once been. A few shows had to be postponed, and some performances were canceled. That was something rarely seen in Alabama's history, a band long known for its relentless and disciplined touring schedule over many decades. For Randy, it was the moment when he had to admit something he had long tried to ignore. The human body cannot keep running forever. After that tour, he began adjusting the rhythm of his life. The demanding schedules no longer stretched on for months at a time. Instead, there were fewer performances, more carefully chosen, but far more meaningful. Randy still sang, still stood on the stage he knew so well, but he was no longer racing against time. He began spending more time caring for his health. Regular medical checkups became a familiar part of life, and days of rest were no longer seen as interruptions, but as something necessary to keep moving forward. Perhaps the greatest challenge for an artist is not stopping, but learning how to slow down. After everything he had gone through, from persistent migraines to the battle with cancer to the dizzy moments on stage, Randy Owen gradually came to understand that listening to his own body was just as important as listening to the audience. And so he continued his musical path, only now with a different rhythm, slower, deeper, and perhaps more meaningful than ever before. Yet the life of Randy Owen cannot be measured only by concert nights or chart rankings. Over time, he also had to face something that every human being eventually encounters: the pain of loss when loved ones gradually leave this world. The first loss, and perhaps the deepest wound in Randy's life, came in 1980. On March 17 of that year, his father, Gladstone Ewell Owen, passed away at the age of 59 after a serious illness. At the time, Randy was only 30 years old. His life was standing at the threshold of an entirely new chapter. The band Alabama had just signed a major contract with RCA Records, and the album My Home's in Alabama was about to be released, opening the road that would lead them into the ranks of the biggest names in country music. But the man who had first placed a guitar into Randy's hands did not live long enough to see any of it. His father was not simply an ordinary parent. He was the one who planted the seed of music in Randy's life when he was still very young. Gladstone Owen was the one who taught his son his first chords, the one who brought country and gospel melodies into the family's small home. During those childhood years in Alabama, music was not a distant dream. It was a part of daily life, part of evenings spent together, part of songs echoing across the southern fields. So when his father passed away, Randy did not just lose a loved one, he lost the man who had shown him the path. Many years later, when looking back at that time, Randy Owen once said a short but heavy sentence: "It still haunts me." The haunting was not because he had failed to say goodbye, but because his father never had the chance to see his son standing at the height of his career. Just a few months after Gladstone Owen's death, Alabama began exploding across the United States. Their songs flooded the country charts. Tours followed one after another. Large stages opened before them. And Randy Owen, the boy who once learned guitar from his father, now stood as the voice before tens of thousands of fans. But within those brilliant moments, there was always an empty space, a space shaped like his father. To face that pain, Randy did the only thing he had always known how to do. He wrote music. The song First Christmas Without Daddy was born from that emptiness. The track appeared on Alabama's Christmas album, telling the story of the first holiday season when a father was no longer sitting in his familiar chair. There was no exaggeration, no dramatic wording, just the quiet sadness of a son realizing that some Christmas seasons will never feel the same again. For many fans, it became one of the most emotional songs Randy Owen had ever written. But for him, it was simply a way of keeping his father alive a little longer through music. Time passed, and the pain did not disappear. It simply settled, like a scar that one eventually learns to live with. Then, more than 40 years later, Randy's life once again forced him to say goodbye. On the 2nd of June 2022, his mother, Martha Alice Teague Owen, passed away at the age of 90 after a brief illness in Fort Payne, Alabama, surrounded by her family. If Randy's father was the one who first placed a guitar in his hands, then his mother was the one who brought music into the very rhythm of the family's life. Back in the 1960s, Martha and her husband formed a family gospel group called the Singing Owen Family. They sang in small churches, at community gatherings, and during simple town events. There were no grand stages, no dazzling lights, only the sound of instruments, voices raised in song, and a shared belief that music was a sacred gift given to humankind. Randy grew up surrounded by those singing moments. He and his two sisters, Reba Patterson and Rachel Carroll, were encouraged by their mother to raise their voices from an early age. The practice sessions in the living room and the performances at the local church quietly laid the foundation for the musical path Randy would follow for the rest of his life. In a message shared with fans, Randy Owen said that his mother had always been his greatest supporter. She followed every step of Alabama's journey, took pride in each of her son's successes, and continued to find simple joy whenever she heard Randy's familiar voice singing. When she passed away, Randy was 72 years old. A man who had lived through decades of fame, enormous stages, and countless awards, yet in that moment of loss, he was simply a son who had just lost his mother. Around that same time, Randy Owen also had to say goodbye to someone else, someone who was not only a friend, but almost a member of the family. Jeff Cook, Randy's cousin and a founding member of Alabama, passed away after a long struggle with health problems. Jeff was not only the band's guitarist and keyboard player, he had been part of the Alabama story from the very beginning. 3 young men from Fort Payne had once started with nothing, playing music in small bars and traveling along the long roads of the American South, before eventually standing on the biggest stages in country music. Over the years, they had become more than colleagues. They had become family. So when Jeff Cook passed away, Randy Owen said the pain was something difficult to put into words. To him, Jeff was not just a friend, but a part of his own life. For decades, they had stood side by side on stage, sharing tours, moments of triumph, and also the difficult days. When one of them leaves, the emptiness that remains is not only within the band, but also within the hearts of those who stay behind. For that reason, the life of Randy Owen cannot be written only through hit songs, platinum albums, or dazzling concert nights. It is also the story of a man who has had to say goodbye to the most important people in his life. The father who first placed a guitar in his hands, the mother who taught him his first notes, and the cousin who stood beside him on stage for half a century. Each loss leaves behind an empty space. Yet it is precisely those empty spaces that have made Randy Owen's music grow deeper with time. Because in the end, the songs he sings are not merely melodies. They are memories, they are love, and sometimes they are the only way to keep those who have gone still present within his life. Yet the life of Randy Owen is not written only through loss. Amid the years of fame, the long tours, and even during the most difficult moments, there has always been one woman quietly walking beside him on that path, his wife, Kelly Owen. When they first met, Randy was just a young man in Fort Payne, carrying his guitar and believing that music could take him further than the small bar stages scattered across the southern states. At that time, his life had no dazzling lights or massive audiences, only long nights of singing, car rides through small towns, and modest paychecks that were just enough to keep the journey going. Their relationship grew while fame was still a distant dream. While the band continued traveling between small stages, Kelly was there, witnessing Randy's first steps. She never stepped into the spotlight and never sought attention. Yet she was always the one standing behind him, quietly believing that the road Randy had chosen would eventually lead him to something greater. In 1975, Randy and Kelly got married. At the time, no one could have imagined that the young man starting his family would later become the lead voice of one of the most successful bands in country music history. Their life at first was simple. With no fame and no glory, just two young people trying to build a home together while the future remained uncertain. Then, when Alabama signed their recording contract and their first songs began climbing the charts, Randy's life changed rapidly. Touring schedules became intense, and long journeys carried him from one city to another. While he stood in front of thousands of fans each night, Kelly stayed home caring for the family and raising their children. They had 3 children, and Randy later admitted many times that without Kelly, he would never have been able to pursue music while also keeping his family together. In many interviews, Randy said that Kelly was the one who helped him maintain balance between fame and life. When the touring schedule became overwhelming or when major decisions had to be made, she was always the one reminding him that music was only one part of life. In later years, when Randy faced illness and family loss, Kelly's presence became even more important. She was not on stage with him, but she was beside him in the moments that stage lights could never reach. Their love was not written through grand romantic stories. It was written through time, patience, and years of walking together through every change life brought. More than half a century has passed, from the days when Randy sang in small clubs to the time he became the voice of a band that sold millions of records across America, and Kelly has remained there, quietly walking beside him through every stage of the journey. Now, as both of them have passed their 70s, Randy Owen's life has taken on a different rhythm. Slower, calmer, yet more peaceful. After decades under the glare of stage lights, he no longer lives within the relentless pace of touring that defined his peak years. Most of the time, Randy and Kelly live on their family farm near Fort Payne, Alabama, the place where he grew up and the place he has always wanted to return to after every journey. There, Randy tends to his cattle, works with the land, and enjoys the simple life of the farm, something very different from the noise of the stadiums that once filled with fans listening to him sing. Quiet mornings on the farm and afternoons watching the sunlight fade across the field seemed to bring him a sense of peace that stage lights could never replace. Even so, music has never left Randy's life. He still occasionally performs with the band Alabama, appearing in special concerts and fan events. The performances are no longer as frequent as before, but each time he steps on stage, Randy still carries the familiar voice that has accompanied generations of country music listeners. Beyond music, Randy Owen has also devoted much of his energy to charitable work. For many years, he has supported fundraising efforts for Jude Children's Research Hospital, an organization he has remained connected to for a long time. At his Tennessee River Music Farm, Randy and his family also host fundraising events and cattle auctions to support the local community. Randy Owen's life today no longer revolves around stage lights as it once did. Instead, it is a blend of music, family, farm work, and community support. After a long journey filled with fame, endless tours, and health challenges, he seems to have found a rhythm of life that suits him far better. And for Randy, perhaps the most important thing now is not how many shows he performs each year, but that he can still sing, still live surrounded by music, and when the stage lights finally fade, Kelly is still there beside him, walking home together. In the end, the story of Randy Owen is not only the journey of a country music star, but the journey of a man who has passed through glory, illness, loss, and the quiet spaces that no stage light can illuminate. He has sung for millions of people, yet he has also carried deeply personal pain within his heart. Over time, those scars have made both his voice and his life more profound than ever before. And perhaps after all the charts, the awards, and the sold-out concerts, the most beautiful things that remain are still music, family, and a place to return to when the stage lights finally go dark. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like, share a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can continue following along with us. Thank you for listening.